Peter Pan wasn't a hero. He was hiding a dark secret. Everyone knows Peter Pan. The boy in green who flies through the stars, battles pirates, and leads a gang of happy, laughing lost boys through the magical forests of Neverland. He's the symbol of childhood freedom, carefree, fearless, and wild. But what if we told you that behind that smile was something darker? That Peter Pan wasn't just running from adulthood, but from something he didn't want anyone to find. Because Peter Pan doesn't just escape reality. He builds a world where he controls everything, where time stands still, no one grows old, and those who question him vanish. Let's go back. Not to Neverland, but to the real world, the one JM Barrie lived in. The author of Peter Pan didn't invent this story out of thin air. In 1897, he met the Llewellyn Davies family, 5 young brothers who had recently lost their father. Barrie, a lonely man haunted by childhood trauma and death, became obsessed with the boys. He wrote stories for them, took them on adventures, became like a second father. And then, one by one, the boys began to disappear from his life, through illness, accidents, or mysterious circumstances. Peter Pan, it turns out, was named after one of those boys, Peter Llewellyn Davies. He hated the fame. Later in life, he would call Peter Pan that terrible masterpiece. He eventually died by suicide, throwing himself under a train. But before that, he left behind journals, fragments of a truth he couldn't say out loud, truths about Barrie, about the story, about why Peter Pan always seemed more tragic than magical. And here's where it gets strange. In the original versions of the tale, Peter isn't a charming rogue. He's cold, unfeeling. He forgets people, on purpose. He laughs when they die. He kills pirates not in battle, but for fun. And the lost boys? They don't just get lost. When they grow up, Peter thins them out. That's the exact phrase. Some disappear, some die. And Peter, he forgets their names. This isn't just a kid who wants to play forever. It's a boy who doesn't want anyone else to grow up either, who punishes those who change, who controls a world that can't exist without him in the center. So where is the line between imagination and manipulation? Between fantasy and denial? Neverland isn't a playground, it's a cage. And Peter holds the key. Even Wendy, the sweet, brave girl from London who flies away on moonlight, isn't safe. Peter brings her to Neverland, not out of love, but out of need. He wants a mother, yes, but only one who never questions him. And when she does, he replaces her. Over and over again, in every version of the story, he finds a new Wendy, each one younger, each one easier to mold. And what about the lost boys? They follow him blindly. But where are their families? How did they get there? They don't remember, because Peter doesn't let them. Some literary scholars believe Peter Pan was never a hero, but a metaphor. A representation of what happens when we refuse to face time, change, or grief. When we build our own Neverlands so we never have to grow or hurt. But there's more. In the oldest drafts of the story, Peter isn't from London. He's not even human. He's a creature, half boy, half bird, who escaped from being a baby because he refused to be told what to do. He lives in the wild, forgets who he is, and steals children to play with him. But when they stop playing the way he likes, they vanish. This isn't childhood freedom. This is childhood frozen in fear. And if that's the real Peter Pan, then what is Neverland really? Some say it's heaven. Some say it's purgatory. Others say it's a mental creation. A dreamscape Peter built to protect himself from a trauma too big to face. A place where no one grows up, because growing up means facing the pain you buried long ago, and maybe that's the secret. Peter doesn't want to stay young. He wants to stay hidden, because something happened. Something he doesn't want to remember. And Neverland is the only place where he never has to. The question is, what did he see? What is he trying to forget? And why does he keep dragging others into the dream with him? Because make no mistake, Peter Pan isn't just running. He's recruiting. And if you follow him, you may never leave. Neverland is beautiful. That's the first trick. It's filled with fairies and mermaids, pirate ships and glowing lagoons. It promises adventure, freedom, escape. But when you look closer, really look, you begin to notice something's wrong. Nothing grows in Neverland. Not really. Not the trees. Not the boys. Not even the stories. It's a place suspended in time, like a snow globe Peter never wants to shake. Every day is the same sword fights, the same laughter, the same stories told over and over until they don't mean anything anymore. And if someone tries to remember something different, where they came from, who they were before, they forget. Or worse, they're made to forget. The Lost Boys don't have parents. They barely remember their names. When Wendy asks where they're from, they shrug. Peter won't let them remember. And why would he? If they remembered, they might want to leave. They might miss home. They might realize they've been trapped. There's a scene most people overlook. Peter says that when the Lost Boys grow up, he thins them out. No one asks what that means. But JM Barrie wasn't writing nonsense. He was clever with his words. Too clever. Thinning out wasn't a magical accident. It was a choice. A cleansing. If they changed, they disappeared. Neverland is a place without time. And time is the only thing that makes life real. Without it, there's no growth, no learning, no grief, yes, but also no healing. The moment you enter Peter's world, you're frozen. And what he wants more than anything is for you to stay that way. Hook understands this. That's why he's Peter's true enemy, not because he's evil, but because he's grown up. He's a living reminder of what Peter hates most: change, age, experience, and deep down, fear. But here's what most don't realize. Hook wasn't always a villain. In early drafts of the story, he's described as a gentleman, a former student of Eton, intelligent, cultured, but twisted. Not from cruelty, but from obsession. An obsession with Peter. And if you read between the lines, you begin to wonder, what if Hook was once a lost boy? What if he grew up, remembered who he was, and tried to escape? What if his war with Peter isn't about good versus evil, but about truth versus illusion? Hook wants order. Peter wants chaos. Hook remembers. Peter erases. And in that battle, Peter always wins, because Peter controls Neverland. Every island, every shadow, every creature. The fairies obey him. The mermaids flirt with him. Even the crocodile, who seems to chase Hook endlessly, follows a rhythm Peter understands. This isn't a fantasy world. It's a kingdom built for one. And the currency isn't gold. It's loyalty. As long as the Lost Boys laugh, Peter is powerful. As long as they forget the pain of the past, he can pretend there was no pain at all. But sometimes, they remember, and that's when they disappear. There's something eerie about the way Peter talks. He's always cheerful, always laughing. But the laughter is hollow, forced, like someone who's trying not to cry. He says things like, "To die would be an awfully big adventure." But he says it casually. Like dying doesn't scare him, because he doesn't believe it's real. But maybe it already happened. Some theories suggest Peter Pan himself is dead, that he died as a child, perhaps from illness, perhaps from accident, and that Neverland is the afterlife his mind built to survive the shock. A purgatory where he brings other souls so he's not alone, where he is king, because he never got to be anything else. And if that's true, if Neverland is Peter's own limbo, then every child he brings there is being stolen from their own chance to move on. That's the secret. Not that Peter is a villain, but that he is broken, lost in his own grief, and his escape has become everyone else's prison. Wendy senses it. She sees the cracks. She remembers bedtime stories. She remembers her mother, and Peter doesn't like that. He doesn't want her to grow. He wants her to stay. Forever. Because if she leaves, the illusion breaks. And that's the second trick of Neverland. It gives you everything you want until you forget what you need. You forget home. You forget pain. And then you forget yourself. So when the Lost Boys say they don't remember their names, it's not fantasy, it's warning. The tragedy behind the tale, a story written in loss. Before there was Peter Pan, there was JM Barrie, a small, quiet man with a high voice, a love for children's laughter, and a heart haunted by ghosts. He wasn't the kind of writer who chased fame. He chased something else, something he lost when he was just 6 years old. Barrie's older brother David was the family favorite, brilliant, athletic, full of life. But when David was just 13, he died in a skating accident, a fall, a frozen pond, and he was gone. Barrie's mother never recovered. She withdrew into silence. And in that silence, Barrie did something that would change him forever. He began to imitate David, his voice, his gestures, even the way he walked. He thought maybe if he became his dead brother, his mother might smile again. She didn't. But the idea stuck. What if you could live forever in someone else's memory? What if you could stop time before the moment everything broke? That idea grew inside Barrie like a seed. He never truly grew up, physically or emotionally. As an adult, he stood barely 5 feet tall, and even as his peers married and moved on, Barrie remained childlike, obsessed with innocence, with keeping things the way they were. Then, in 1897, he met the Davies family. Sylvia Llewellyn Davies and her 5 sons became his new world. Barrie was enchanted by their games, their laughter, their stories. He told them tales of pirates and flying boys, fairies and lost islands. Slowly, he became more than a family friend. He was a second father. He walked them through parks, took photographs, wrote them letters every day. But then Sylvia died of cancer, and Barrie, without legal adoption, rewrote her will. He inserted himself as the children's guardian. Just like that, he became the keeper of 5 young boys. One of them was named Peter. They were the Lost Boys, and Barrie was their Peter Pan. Except, things didn't go the way the stories promised. Michael, the most creative of the boys, drowned at age 20, some say by suicide. George, the oldest, died in the trenches of World War I. Peter, the one whose name became immortal in books and plays, grew up resenting the fame. He said Barrie's story cast a long shadow over his life. In 1960, he threw himself onto the tracks of the London Underground. By then, the public had forgotten the connection. They didn't know Peter Pan was real, that he walked the streets, burdened by a legacy he never chose. But Barrie knew, and when he died, he left everything to Great Ormond Street Hospital for children, as if trying to make peace with a story he couldn't rewrite. But the darkness behind Peter Pan isn't just biographical. It's spiritual. There are passages in the early drafts that reveal disturbing things. Peter forgets his adventures moments after they happen. He forgets his friends. He even forgets Tinker Bell after she dies. Barrie describes him as heartless, not because he's cruel, but because his memory doesn't hold on, as if he's trapped in a loop, a dream he can't wake up from. And what does that sound like? Trauma. Psychologists have long said that dissociation, forgetting pain, splitting off memories, is a defense mechanism, and Peter Pan fits the pattern perfectly. He isolates himself. He rejects age, time, emotion. He clings to fantasy. He doesn't laugh because he's joyful. He laughs so he doesn't have to cry. And now the story starts to change. Peter Pan isn't a whimsical legend. He's a warning about what happens when grief is left unchecked, when children are idolized but never protected, when play becomes a shield and nothing else gets through. And it's not just Barrie's pain. It's ours. Because how many of us build our own Neverlands? How many bury memories so deep we forget they ever happened? How many pretend we're fine, laughing, performing, while inside we're still frozen at the moment something broke? Peter Pan lives in that place, and he invites others to join him. That's the real secret. Not that he steals children, but that he offers them what they crave. Escape. No parents, no pain, just games, forever. But it's a lie, because growing up isn't what kills you. It's pretending you never needed to. Everyone wants to be a lost boy. At first, no school, no rules, no adults. You hunt pirates, you swim with mermaids, you sleep in tree houses and live on your own terms. But after the first few days in Neverland, something strange begins to happen. The faces around you blur. You forget your brother's name. You forget what city you came from. You forget how old you are. And when you ask Peter how long you've been here, he laughs. Because time doesn't move in Neverland, not forward, not back. It just circles. That's the first sign you're trapped. The second is what happens when you start asking too many questions. Where's Curly? Didn't Toodles used to sleep in that bed? What happened to Slightly? Peter shrugs. They grew up. But that's not possible here. No one grows up in Neverland. It's the one rule. So how did they disappear? The book gives us one line, one chilling line, and then moves on. When they seem to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out. What does that mean? Some say it's symbolic, that he sends them back, that they just fade away. But Barrie never clarifies. In fact, when pressed about it, he didn't soften the language. He made it colder. Peter Pan doesn't tolerate change, not in others, not in himself. And if you begin to change, if you miss your mother, or question his leadership, or ask about the world you left behind, you are a threat to his dream. And he removes threats. There's a terrifying scene, often cut from adaptations, where Peter nearly kills a lost boy because he thinks the boy is trying to become leader. He draws his dagger. His smile disappears. For a brief moment, the child becomes something else, something closer to a god with a grudge. Even Hook, the so-called villain, warns Wendy. He says Peter is not what he seems, that he's dangerous. But no one listens to Hook. He's the grown-up, the enemy. And yet, he's the only one who remembers who he is. Because that's the secret of the Lost Boys. They didn't all get lost by accident. Some were taken. Some followed Peter willingly, desperate to escape their homes. But others were recruited in moments of sadness, loneliness, confusion. And once in Neverland, their memories started to fade. And here's the most important part. None of them ever leave. Wendy does. The girls always do. Peter lets them go, but only when he finds a replacement. Another Wendy to play the part of caretaker, because Peter needs someone to hold the illusion together. But the boys, they stay, or they vanish. And that's where the story turns sinister. Neverland becomes a loop, a ritual. Peter brings new children, they play the same games, and when they start to ask questions, they disappear. Their names are replaced, their memories erased, the same stories play on repeat, the same battles, the same victories, the same laughter. But listen closely, and you'll hear the cracks. Toodles forgets what game they're playing. Nibs weeps in his sleep and doesn't know why. And when one lost boy finds a drawing of his mother in Wendy's bag, he stares at it like he's looking at a ghost. These aren't children having fun. These are prisoners playing dress-up. And Peter Pan is the warden, but not because he's cruel, because he's terrified. If he allows one of them to leave, it means acknowledging that time is real. That change is possible. That grief is coming. And Peter can't face that. So he chooses control, over and over, until no one around him can remember what life was like before the island. That's what happens when you try to leave. You either vanish or forget why you ever wanted to. And in that moment, the fantasy becomes horror. The boy who refuses to grow up isn't innocent. He's dangerous. Not because he wants to hurt anyone, but because he can't let go of the past. And when you can't let go, you start holding others down with you. Peter Pan isn't flying. He's falling, and he's pulling the lost boys with him. They say Peter Pan flies because he's full of joy, that happy thoughts lift him into the sky. But by now, we know better. Peter doesn't fly to feel free. He flies to escape what's beneath him. Because the ground, the real world, holds a weight he can't carry. And it's catching up. In the stories, he always wins. He outsmarts Hook, outspeeds the pirates, outlaughs every danger. But if you look closely, the victories aren't victories, they're replays. Every story resets, every enemy returns, and Peter's triumph never changes the world. That's not adventure. That's purgatory. Because Peter isn't a boy anymore. He's something else now. A myth with no origin. A spirit of denial. A whisper in the ears of children too tired to dream of adulthood. He shows up not when they're happy, but when they're broken, lonely, hurt, and he promises them what every wounded child wants to hear. You don't have to grow up. But it's a trap. Because while childhood is meant to be brief, beautiful, and full of light, Peter's version is a cage with no door, no healing, no end. The final Wendy. In one version of the tale, Peter returns to London. He looks for Wendy, his Wendy, but finds her grown. She has a daughter now. She smiles at him softly, but doesn't follow. Peter is confused, angry, heartbroken. He waits for the child to wake up, the next Wendy. And when she does, he whisks her away. He never learns. Because to Peter, love isn't something that grows. It's something that repeats. As long as she's young enough, she'll love him. As long as she's wide-eyed, she won't question the rules. But when the truth sets in, that she's human and time is real, he finds another. That's how the cycle survives. But not forever. There's a version that never made it to print. A lost scene from Barrie's notes. In it, an older lost boy wakes up. Not older in years, but in spirit. He remembers who he was. He says his real name out loud. Peter hears it and recoils. Don't say that, Peter warns. Why? Because it means you're leaving. The truth of Neverland. So what is Neverland? Some say it's heaven for lost children. Others say it's a mirror of Barrie's own mind, frozen, whimsical, fractured by loss. But here's another theory. What if Neverland isn't a place at all? What if it's a story? A lie told so often it became real. A fantasy so seductive, it consumed not just children, but the adults who never healed from childhood wounds. What if Neverland is where we go in our minds to avoid truth? Because the truth is hard. The truth is that childhood ends. The truth is that growing up means facing loss, making mistakes, carrying regret. But it also means freedom. Real freedom. The kind that isn't handed to you by a flying boy, but earned through choices, change, and love that doesn't need rules. Peter never knew that kind of freedom, because he was too busy running. And in the end, the one thing Peter could never defeat was time. The final flight. There's one more version of the story. It's not in any book. It's whispered. It says that Peter eventually flew too far. That one night, he soared into the stars, looking for another child, another Wendy, and didn't come back. Some say he finally remembered. Some say he looked down and saw the world he left behind, his mother's face, his brother's grave, the boys who vanished from Neverland, and his heart broke open. And with no happy thought left to cling to, he fell. But the truth? The truth is, Peter Pan never existed. Not really. He was the part of us that didn't want to heal. The part that said, stay here, don't move, don't change, don't hurt. He was the voice of the wound, not the recovery. And when we stop listening to that voice, when we choose to grow, to cry, to live despite the scars, that's when Peter fades. Not in hate, but in peace, the real ending. And here's the most important part. The boys who did leave, they found new stories. Wendy became a writer. The lost boys became fathers. Hook, yes, even Hook, found peace in remembering who he once was before the island took him. And the fairies, they returned to the earth. The crocodile swam on. And Neverland quieted. Because when you let go of the fantasy, the world doesn't disappear. It begins. Real adventure isn't running away. It's showing up. It's taking the next step. It's remembering the past and choosing to live anyway. Peter Pan wasn't a villain. He was a wound, a myth we created to shelter pain we didn't know how to speak aloud. But now, we speak it. We heal. And in doing so, we grow up. Not into dull adults, but into people who choose love over fear, truth over fantasy, life over illusion. And that's a story worth telling. So if one day someone ever tells you Peter Pan was a hero, ask them this. What happens to the kids who say no? What happens when the laughter stops? What happens when Neverland isn't enough? And then tell them the real story. Because somewhere a lost boy is waking up. Somewhere a child is remembering their name. And somewhere the real adventure is just beginning. Subscribe for more true tales, forgotten legends, and the hidden truths behind the stories we thought we knew. This is Uncle Luke Tells, where myths are questioned and history speaks.